I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, the underworld, what I am will never know evil. For what I am is with me, its rod and its staff, they comfort me. What I am preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. It anointeth my head with oil, my cup runneth over with the continuous renewing of the Spirit within. Worshipper and worshipee, fully experienced within. And surely I will continue to experience blessing all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the continuous renewing of the Spirit of what I am, one with the most super intelligent power and force of love and creation, a quickening spirit forever. What's happening? Shout out to the chat. A reminder, everybody got demodded, so hopefully there's no hard feelings there. It's been known in the history of the channel. We have no mods at this time. It was a bit of an honorary thing. Good to see you, Joe Moore. Shout out to Rick. Learning to fly. I believe our poll is in the house. 4 viewing and 4 likes. And no haters in the house. So wonderful, folks. I have... this could be a banger. Now that the demons are stirred up with the recitation, the modified recitation of Psalm 23. And I don't mean the fine folks that are present in the live chat. Shout out to the replay crew. And thank you to the donations and the donators. They've gotten me back on the dark chocolate. Much appreciated. Ordered some lion's mane extract powder yesterday. That will be arriving in a few days. Bezos taking his time with this one. Not sure what's up with that, Mr. Bezos. Let's, I've employed you, sir, to deposit my my mushroom extract powder into an Amazon locker nearby. So let's chop. Let's make with it. Make with the mushroom powder. Oh, and taurine, which none of this is health advice, and I recommend nothing specifically. But if somebody asked me, just for yourself, Benton, what do you find most beneficial? Certainly, taurine would be amongst that. And if you see people drinking Monster energy drinks or Red Bull, I believe a regular conventional size can of Monster has 1,000 milligrams or 1 gram of taurine. Quite helpful with the digestion. And I have some notes here. Digestion certainly amongst them. Spiritually attacked in my sleep via dreams, vivid dreams. And I'm one of these people. I divorced myself. The Royal We, Benton here, divorced himself from the content of his dreams long ago. No longer, keeping dream journals or trying to interpret the meaning. The meaning I've found, Benton's found for himself, is to almost like defragging a hard drive. And then, again, release, trust, acceptance, and let's say the large intestine. And then, something talked about on yesterday's live stream, the necessity around consuming this, food that is in, at best case scenario is poor quality, especially if one is relying on the food system in this country, which is, of course, a business. Why does that have to be a business? Large corporations. But let's not get into that just yet. There's time. And there seems to be times recently where, it seems like my body's going through a healing, like detoxification in my sleep, which is preferable if I'm, it's nice to wake up and then have things happen. And again, trying not to go TMI with it, but, to visit the restroom first thing in the morning. and that happened today. Yay! And this concept of Chinese medicine, the lungs and the colon or large intestine associated with grief, which in my case, seemingly the healing having to do around acceptance of what society or the lack thereof, perhaps, and then healing the colon. And as we see, younger folks even are poop bag crews. If anybody's ever seen this, meaning people in their 20s, mid 20s, late 20s, into their early 30s, having their colons removed. Yet another reason that, again, this is not medical advice, but yet another reason old Benton here, doesn't go to doctors, because they do things like, oh, it's medical coding and billing. This is a business like everything else. And hey, this insurance will pay for, $20,000 to remove this fella's colon or whatever. No, I'm good. Good on that. I think I'll cross over whole, as they say, if that's a thing. And then, over time, detoxing and seeing these organs healed, and perhaps, in my case, perhaps the large intestine is the last one, and certainly the small intestine. And that's what I was going through, if anybody's curious, around the time I visited a particular YouTube content creator in the so-called truth community known as Aluma Tommy. Spent some time with him in his apartment in Denver, Colorado, and was going through some pretty serious healing of the large intestine, and somewhat incapacitated as a result. Also physically quite frail, and I remember, Denver at elevation, and Tommy was, on either the top floor or the second to the top floor. So, just walking up all of these stairs in the high elevation, and realizing at the time, that my physical fitness and my own vigor was not there, right? And then dealing with Aluma Tommy, who, is certainly not lacking in the energy department, right? If you know, you know. If you don't know, that's okay. No worries there. We'll move on. And then, so this vivid dream, and then realizing that, some of it is tied around perhaps accepting certain fears that, may be repressed in some ways, and then the dream serving to unrepress, or to at least make sure that in the short term that the whatever fear is not repressed. And I don't know that the content of the dream is necessary, but the vividness was certainly noticeable. And then, in observing, and this is where meditation and body scanning proves to be so helpful in the chakra systems, if that's a thing. Again, this is on some level reading about a concept and then sort of imagining it within one's own body. I mean, it's ultimately what we're talking about. And I've noticed certain people in the so-called truth community want to kind of debunk or even induce fear around, spiritual practice concepts. And this is demonic in my view, because anything, and this will tie into the spiritual war within. And I just took some really good notes on just that part of the topic. And that's where I suspect this could transition into a banger. And yesterday's stream, I would say the preaching towards the end, when the energy picked up, I was fairly satisfied. I don't know that pride is the proper term. Satisfied with the actual preaching, and I don't even want to get into it. But I don't even want to get into it. Enunciate, sir. Enunciate. So making all of these various connections, and bear with me. There will probably be some repeating of words, because I have not listened to myself so attentively as to realize that I am mumbling and sort of, slack-jawed yokeling my way through portions of the broadcast, and in IRL. Goodness, and this is something to do with the cognition. However, as a being who's been, historically unbalanced towards the more intellectual or mental processes, having internally bootstrapped mind, body, and spirit, it would sort of make sense to neglect the cognitive on some level in order to focus on in the body for so many years now due to the chronic illness. Um, and yeah, a lot of healing. And certainly old Benton here in his life cites the Lord Christ Jesus and understanding connotations to demonic religions such as Christianity, which is certainly demonic, just like all of the other religions. And let's not get into that just yet, although there's time. Let's take our time, Benton. We started early. We've had dark chocolate again. Thank you to the donators for the dark chocolate. I have a 10-day supply. Well, now 9-day supply. Or is it 8? I don't remember. Did I start yesterday? Yeah, 8 days remaining. We're jacked up on the ginseng root as well, which is not quite as energizing as folks have made it out to be. Red Korean ginseng, known as an adaptogen. I found it to be more helpful for mood and just overall well-being versus energy necessarily. And again, it's half of it is the placebo effect, and I acknowledge that. The strong belief that these things work versus folks who may say, "Oh, ha ha ha, that's expensive pee." It's like, okay, well, clearly it's not going to work because for them because the placebo effect would work in reverse, right? Clearly, it would also necessarily work in reverse. Oh, we started out with 3 and 4, and we lost 1. Oh no, they're back. And I also pop into streams and then pop out in order to see what's going on with other content. So I think that's enough talk of the colon, but it's difficult to describe, but there was certainly a striking effect with the being spiritually attacked in the dream, spiritually attacked upon awakening, very briefly experiencing irrational fears around the near future, which has not happened recently. Then immediately reframing that and then realizing, oh, wait a minute, urgent need to visit the restroom. So yeah, this all has to be, it has to be related. And the dream specifically was right before I woke up. And then sort of puzzling over, like, really, is this what I'm, and that's the spiritual attack also, this idea of an incubus or a succubus or whatever, whatever energetically might want to, feed vampirically on, whatever negative states can be, seemingly generated within a dream. And then also reconciling that with the waking dream surrealistic aspects of unreality within so-called waking life, but within always the context of illusion or delusion, whereby what I am can never be individuated and, strictly speaking, occupy this place, because time, space, location, place, those are, not even completely, quote, real or concrete concepts. They exist within the context of the creative force of what I am, not the other way around. And this realm of inversion, of course, it pushes the inverted notion that, well, God would exist in relation to this place, right? Creative force and all of these things, it ties, its origins are here. Well, no, it's quite the opposite, but let's not go off into that just yet. And let's see the notes. Yeah, my apologies for teasing some of the more spiritual aspects. But the problem is, if I go into the spiritual aspects this early, I will neglect the more mundane. And at the risk of a sexual sounding reference, perhaps shoot the wad a little too early. I need to find another way to say that. So on my post tab is a couple of videos, one from yesterday, so second to the newest post. And this is interesting about YouTube. This is something I've realized this morning about the YouTube algorithm, and it also it ties into the concept of everything as a business. Well, YouTube channels are a business, right? Even this one, in a way, um, it's a business. Now, and that's me sort of, for effect saying, well, there are donations. So that is a business transaction in a way, even if it could be construed and is properly construed as, freely giving at times and freely accepting at times. Giving and receiving are the same thing energetically. If I freely give and someone else freely accepts, both parties are both giving and receiving, if that makes sense. So, hang on, have I lost the notes here? Yeah, the YouTube algorithm, and what's interesting is I found that video, and it has a picture of Tyler Durden, Brad Pitt from Fight Club, and there's many, many, many videos in that vein that hit the YouTube algorithm, especially because men or males of a certain age become infatuated with, and this is a concept that Benton learned many years ago through the writings of a forums poster on sosuave.net called Pook, P-O-O-K. And this was a scrawny gentleman, somewhat similar to Benton being scrawny back in the day, who chose to lift weights and put on a bunch of size. And Pook eventually discovered that the muscles and this idea of a man with a six-pack abs and all cut up like Brad Pitt in Fight Club, it functions as like a masculine dress. It's sort of a man or a male version of what, a woman wearing a nice dress. So this YouTube video that I never would have found, and I will give the context because I never would have seen that thumbnail. In a vacuum, if that showed up in my feed, there's a 0% chance of me clicking on that. Because I had already, I won't even get into my own experiences with the movie Fight Club right now, but it predates YouTube, certainly, my own realizations around the movie. And then these businesses of YouTube channels necessarily having to design their content, or at least this is the marketing and advertising of the content. So the content creator creates the content, and then now YouTube allows them a forum to market and disseminate the content. And this is where you get into so many complaints in the comments of, hey, clickbait, clickbait, clickbait. It's like, hey, man, this is a clickbait platform. These channels are businesses, right? A lot of these people, whether it's their side hustle or part-time job, or in some cases, main source of income. So the person who made that video, would have been intelligent enough to understand, well, they need to structure their advertising and marketing to catch the algo, which is interesting because certain influential, arguably, people like me who, historically have been, a real life influencers. And it persists to this day. If I become interested in something and someone sees that I'm interested in it, it makes other people want to get involved, which is interesting because, so for example, I kept going back to the Hippy Dippy grocery store because they had a special on these chocolate bars. And so the lady who I was asking, and all I wanted to know is, are more of these coming in? And if the answer is no, great, I'll find them somewhere else. And then, of course, a very human thing of then wanting to manage my emotions, because the patterns of humans is around, well, this person must be like the majority of humans who needs their emotions kowtowed to on some level. Well, no, I don't. I just want some information. And this is, certain folks, there will be upsides to the coming, robot or AI, in the future, perhaps I will have my own access to just, can I pretty please with sugar on top, have the knowledge of, is this thing coming in soon? If it is, I'm here every day anyway. I will patiently just check this. It's okay. Like, and so this woman, and men do this too to some extent, but, projecting herself into my space of coming in every day and seemingly being disappointed. Well, Benton's not disappointed. Benton is, hey, if there's chocolates there, I'm buying it. And the reason why the chocolate is out of stock is because people are stocking up on it because it's on sale, right? And Benton also is going to stock up on it because it's on sale. And then Whole Foods, understanding that they are in some way competing against this smaller grocery store. Well, they have it on sale now, but for 50 cents cheaper. So in the end, I got what I wanted for cheaper, but I waited a few days. So, and I have something of a rapport with this woman. You know, we get along. We get along. So I inadvertently influenced her to try dark chocolate, which, of course, when she initially asked me, you know, what does it taste like, or is it any good? I'm like, no, it doesn't taste good at all because chocolate is bitter. Well, so she ended up trying, you know, like the 90% chocolate, you know, and of course reported that it was way too bitter. And now if she had said, hey, I want to try some dark chocolate, because I've tried, you know, just about everything in there that's affordable. And, you know, I could have made her a recommendation that was both dark chocolate, but also had enough of the sugary good taste, right? But she went out on her own, and it's because of, again, my own influence inadvertently, you know. And then I've been this way my whole life. So, you know, Benton is something of an influencer of his own accord. So back to the Fight Club video, it's a profound video. Whether or not it's an AI voice, maybe it is, maybe it's not. It's hard to tell sometimes. You know, whoever wrote the script, maybe AI wrote the script, or maybe a human being that knows how to continuously refine the script and then maybe edit it themselves. And see, this is the upsides of the so-called AI versus just the AI slop that has invaded YouTube. So, you know, there is a skill in sort of, you know, separating the good from the bad, the wheat from the chaff. And also, I do want to say before I continue that part of me wanting to go back to truck driving in a way is to have enough money to whether to find my old computer equipment if it's still available, or to purchase new computer equipment, and then to have at least a month or two in a motel somewhere to make content, because I've have a lot of creative ideas for content that is not the content we're seeing now in the so-called truth community, such as modern men leaving again, which Benton, I'm not in any way denigrating or insulting what's happening there. I view it as like the recent iteration of similar to what I was doing with the hotel streaming, but in this person's own creative artistic way. And then my own ideas for how would I make content versus how I made content then, and to sort of see, is this something not to turn into a business necessarily, but to see maybe is it possible to pay other people to package it and maybe disseminate it on completely separate YouTube channels. So maybe to live stream on the Benton channel, and then to have a systematized process of capturing and disseminating bits and pieces of the content, but on other channels that maybe could catch the algorithm, right? Which in a way, you know, would be a planting of seeds of various ideas here and there. It sounds like fun to me. And again, whether it fails or succeeds, you know, much can be learned in the process. And, you know, I enjoy doing reaction style content anyway. And you know, I know that I'm able to play, you know, to do reaction content and make it interesting, certainly. And so I found this guy's channel because of one video about Arnold Schwarzenegger in the context of bodybuilding caught my attention. And this does tie into the war within. And apparently this fellow, and it's on the channel again, it's the one about Tyler Durden. And I guess he's doing an ongoing series about how Arnold Schwarzenegger, like sociopathically, you know, he remade himself from what he was as a child and his upbringing. He alchemized all of this apparently, and, you know, came out the other end of it, you know, and more or less took what he decided he wanted from life. And I do have some notes that somewhat validate this view, although arguably I would say he did it in a harmful way, at least to other people, which that would be the sociopathic or antisocial elements, arguably, of Mr. Schwarzenegger. And again, so-called truth community, we understand he's not as presented. He did become governor of California, lest we forget. So, there's something there at the level of waking dreams, surrealistic notions of unreality. And then, the movies that represent Skynet, he's in those movies. So clearly this is a systems agent of the highest order, clearly. And so, yes, that's not lost on your broadcaster. And I may play that. I may play the audio of that video, perhaps. It's only about 15 minutes. And that's, really got between his Arnold Schwarzenegger ongoing series and then this Tyler Durden video. And the conclusion is that in order for males to function as men in society, it seems like they must have access to war, whether that's actual military, external realm, war or sports or crime, violent crime, the street life, gangs. There's something about men where, and again, the differentiation between male and man as status, and then increasingly the younger generations are being done a disservice by not even being allowed or facilitating, they're not facilitated and really permitted or given permission to pass into manhood. Now, this is where we get into the college football aspects of the Deep South and sports, being a common way for males to pass into manhood via war. But then what's happening now is when we see the decline of the cultural elements in the Deep South, it used to be the entirety of the Deep South got involved in manhood and masculinity. If it wasn't going to be gangs running the streets, and there's, of course, crossover there. A lot of those people are, also good football players, and in my hometown as well. And then money and business being tied into that, and then the money and business of college sports taking over and in some ways ruining the war. So isn't it, and maybe in a Joseph Heller Catch-22 novel, if anybody's read that, and I don't mean the movie, the actual novel, Catch-22, Joseph Heller, and at a certain point, the business of war, as far as World War II, Vietnam, and then, how many years now has the media perpetuated a notion of World War III? And at this point, and this is also sort of how I got onto this concept of a war and needing a war. At this point, the aspects of my own manhood and masculinity that identify with a need for war say, hey, man, get it on or shut the fuck up. Right? Like, hey, I can deal with this part where maybe it's World War III. And, I'm not that far past the age when the tail end of when somebody could enter the military, right? But, the point I'm making is pretty pleased with sugar on top, dystopia. Just make with the World War III or shut the fuck up at this point. It's been 20 years of me reading Drudge Report or whatever, and on a regular basis, screenshotting, red letter, main page, main headline of Drudge about, World War III. No. Which leads me to believe it's never going to happen, or it is happening in a form that's just not recognizable. And it seems to be happening in a form in which males and females are sort of meeting in the middle of their hormones, whereas the young ladies are now bodybuilding and taking steroids and all of these things. And then to tie it in with Fight Club and the muscles as a masculine dress, and wanting to be viewed and admired a certain type of way. And certainly, if I take my shirt off, it's like a scrawnier version in some ways. I've never had six-pack abs though. That's just never which is fine. Some people genetically, no matter what they do, are not going to have a six-pack, and that's okay. Never really cared, but definitely have a lot of definition in spite of my now reduced muscle mass. There's a hint, you can tell where, oh, this guy used to have some muscles, and veiny, you got veins all over the place. Either way, so kind of like a 140-pound version of Brad Pitt's supposed 155-pound version, which is not that hard to attain. It's funny, these videos talk about, well, you will never look like Brad Pitt, and that is true. It's talked about in this video that I might have to play now. I've referred to it so much, but it's like, well, I don't know. Some of us have the genetics to, yeah, I'm not going to ever have the six-pack side of it, but, in my own eating of a lot of calories and pumping iron, it did not take very long I quickly moved beyond the what Brad Pitt showed in Fight Club. Did not take long at all. And, not to toot my own horn, but then now that's what we see with men and the idea of men and women, or males and females, sort of meeting in the middle of what society considers acceptable is, well, they're both in the gym pumping iron, CrossFit, taking hormone replacement therapy or going on steroids. See? And so where historically it was the men, especially with bodybuilding or strongman or powerlifting, which still do all exist. And I never actually had an interest in doing bodybuilding because, the putting on a Speedo and going on stage, I never would have been into that. And I don't see anything wrong with it. And I enjoy watching a lot of this content that sort of breaks down, and there's channels that compare 1974 Arnold Schwarzenegger to 1998 Ronnie Coleman or whatever. It's all very interesting. Jay Cutler, my favorite all-time bodybuilder, if anybody's curious. Jay Cutler, who's built like a refrigerator. He's known for his blockiness. And then my own, although the guy that played the Incredible Hulk was in the TV show, Lou Ferrigno, but my own, from a very early age, immediately becoming a huge fan of the Incredible Hulk. And that's, in fact, my favorite, all-time favorite superhero, and the only reason I even bothered to watch any of the Avengers movies is I always had. Some of them I've only ever seen because I downloaded them and just fast-forwarded to the Hulk smash parts. It's like, yeah, I got to see Hulk smash. And probably says a lot about my own personality and what people deal with, such as when I delivered a tirade in the streets of Los Angeles yesterday and told people to their faces what level of corporate slaves they are, and if I played it on stream, people would love it just like they loved it when, if I had live streamed it, people would love it just like they loved it when I got drunk and told these masked up idiots in downtown Little Rock, Arkansas, to their faces that they looked like fools and dum-dums. But now I'm allowing myself to become annoyed, so let's bring it down, Benton. Center, calm, chill. Chill the fuck out. Oh, that's much better. And that is healing. It's important to recognize that whatever that is in the moment, that is healing as long as it's not repressed. It's one or the other, right? It's either the repression is harmful, or to experience those states is actually to heal some of the repression of the past. It's funny how close those two things are, and that is part of the war within. It's sort of this idea of a battlefield medic. Well, if the battlefield lies within and it's spiritual, then within me is the battlefield medic. And in this idea of Antifa having medical stations at their protests and counter-protests, I noticed very quickly that the so-called right-wing MAGA types immediately begin to ape that behavior and say, well, we're going to have our own people carrying medical kits and ready to, wash the tear gas out of people's eyes or whatever. Interesting how that works. It's the so-called left acts and the so-called right responds, but seemingly unaware of that dynamic. But let's not get into a critique of the left-right, which it's the same thing. The society is also having them meet in the middle now. And yeah, very interesting to break down those dynamics. But give me a moment, I'll pause real quick and sort of, shout out to the chat, we're double digits. Pick things up and put them down. That's right, Joe. There you go. Here's the key there, Joe, in my opinion, in my experience, is without fear that an idea will be contagious. So I've been free to read about Scientology even when the librarian laughed at me for checking out Scientology books. And I'm looking at her like, hey, lady, you work here. You do understand I took this book off of your shelf on some level. Why are you laughing at me? Because I'm going to go not be afraid of ideas and read about Scientology. But I know that it's a cult already. Like, what is this? And I didn't say that. My mind said it. Meanwhile, that same library in Garland County, Arkansas, would not allow me in the front door a couple of years later because of I was not going to be spritzed. I was not going to allow the person at the door to force me to wear a mask and fucking spritz me with hand sanitizer on my way through. Like, no, I'm good. Good on all that. As a lifetime patron of the library, lest we forget. Anyway, but yeah, thank you for your commentary down there in the chat. And that reminds me, before we move on, one of my own notions around seeing what's going on in the live chat with Landry's channel. And I'm certainly grateful to Landry for even performing and doing that channel. And he seems to be doing it in a much less harmful way. I haven't seen him go live for 6 hours, although probably does at times. But, you know, seeing the agendas in the live chat, watching the live chatters, and at least half of them I have, again, with a nearly photographic memory in certain ways, I have this understanding of how these people post over time, and seeing these agendas play out, you know, on a perpetual basis, and realizing, well, now if I do content reaction, and I understand that if I go live every single day, that eventually I would have similar numbers very quickly, and, you know, 40 to 60 or whatever. But then there are ways to do the chat, and this is not to say Landry's doing anything wrong. That's not the point. Is that to then, has anybody done it through approved users, to let everybody listen, and not that I can stop anybody from listening, but to only let approved users chat, right? Or members only, if it's necessary to turn it into a business. But then probably, do I want to see that defeats the purpose of approved users? That just ends up with money, but everybody gets to comment eventually because of gifted subs or whatever. Everybody that comes every day will end up getting a gifted sub at some point. So do it through approved users, meaning only the people who are contributing at the level of what Joe Moore contributed, you know, something that would push the broadcast forward versus something that meets an agenda. And then to also say, well, if a person is willing to pay attention, to tune into the content enough to push it forward in some way, now they have something of a largesse or a license to push an agenda if they choose to, right? Versus now the reduced ability, while also simultaneously thwarting what? Sock accounts thwarted. So that's why so many people got modded recently, is it was some early version of me seeing, well, can I differentiate between who's sort of christened or blessed into a thing versus who's sort of not moderators, meaning like on some level don't pay them any attention, you know. So I think approved users would be a good way to do that, personally, just my opinion. So perhaps that will happen. And it is a motivator for me to temporarily return to truck driving. You know, even if it's just a repeat of last time, you know, doing it for 2 to 3 months. And if they hadn't micromanaged me, I'd certainly, and let's transition into a little bit of truck driving talk, because the Fight Club stuff is there. I can go back to that at any time. And there are notes, so I won't forget what I was on about. But I'm not going to be able to deal with the micromanagement. So this is where we get into concepts around acceptance and the healing of the large intestine, is to realize that if Benton leaves the comfort of Echo Park, Los Angeles, and this car, and, you know, being able to, you know, access resources and feed myself and all of these things, you know, if I end up at yet another company, and this is really the first company that ever just enforced and just micromanaged the fuck out of me as an experienced truck driver, and just made no bones about it. But they tricked me. They in the context of the orientation, made it seem like this was not a thing, but then micromanaged the fuck out of me. So we'll see how it goes. And part of the quitting of the job that people may not understand is to avoid getting a reputation as a job hopper, because the last thing, and it hurts more, right, for these people that work in offices hiring truck drivers and dispatching truck drivers. It hurts them on a human level when to get to know me, and then if I quit and take another job immediately, they know it. So what happens is, like at the end of my run with Schneider, when I apply for other jobs, the new jobs must verify my employment. By law, they have to know that I have this truck driving experience. So they get alerted when these other companies start checking my official record, they know it. So they also know that's the only time I've done that. Every other company I've worked for, I just quit without applying for jobs. And I usually take at least a couple of months off. So what this has led to is there will be a situation where once the driver gets a reputation for job hopping, it becomes extremely difficult to get hired. So in spite of my lapses in employment, I'm always hireable because I've understood, okay, don't be a job hopper, which doesn't mean don't quit jobs. It means don't work this job for 7 weeks and then hang on to it until I find the job I want to transition to. Don't do that. Just quit and fuck off for a couple of months and then maybe come back. They don't mind that because they need truck drivers on some level. And then eventually this is really going to show you the corporate nature of things. In fact, what would be beneficial if Benton recognizes, well, and this is probably not even possible in the context of a mega carrier, but because I'm going to need to be on a 1099 because I'm pretty sure I'm past the point of even being able to pay federal income taxes at this point. I don't think that's going to be possible. We'll see. I mean, we won't really know till the rubber meets the road, but I was actually, with all of the micromanagement and the insurance running the industry in certain ways, that, in fact, this idea that, oh, get your experience with the big boys, the megas, and then they suck, so go to the mom and pops and they rule. It's like, yeah, maybe that was true in the past. It's no longer the case because now, because of insurance, all the fucking nanny state technology that was pioneered by the big boys has trickled down to the small carriers. So if I'm going to deal with if there's no upside anymore with the small carrier, there are advantages to the big carrier. So it's funny how, again, and this is competition is a sin at the highest levels of corporations, that in fact the big boys were competing against the little boys, and I mean competing by holding them back to not allow them to rise to the level of the big boy. And then do the mom and pops even understand that insurance is operating to incentivize the smaller carriers to take on all of this technology? Meanwhile, guess who's not going to micromanage me is the fly-by-night companies who have been utilizing this foreign labor and non-English speaking labor. And then this is where we talk about Benito Mussolini's helicopter hand in the context of the state of, the merger of the corporations and the government, so-called corporate fascism. And let's not forget, Obama did reference corporate fascism. And I don't think he said Benito Mussolini, but that's what he meant. And I mean the writings attributed to Benito Mussolini, fascist dictator of Italy during World War II. And I've read just enough of that to understand that what that is from the perspective of the state. Everything is the property of the state, including you and your labor. It's all one thing. The government, the corporations, your labor, your land, it all belongs to the state from the perspective of the state. This is very important to understand. And, if people could drill that into their minds and reconcile for that, that would be a big step towards being able to critically think their ways through the bombardment of all of these ideas of these psyops and the news cycle, because the reality is virtually all of us are forced to deal with this because we have relationships with other people. And my mother knows not to bring up what's going on in the news to me, but most people don't. If you try as a so-called truther, if you actually try to have any sort of ongoing relationship with your family or your friends, you know, how much of that forces you to talk about Charlie Kirk or whatever as if it's exactly as presented. And even what I ran into with this guy on my IRL stream recently, he brought up Charlie Kirk, and then he didn't understand that I, you know, had been down the conspiracy theory rabbit holes enough to recognize that, yeah, it's not real, buddy, on some level. But I'm not going to correct him in the moment because it's just simply not worth it to me. And then after he was done and the stream ended, then I was like, hey, I just wanted to bring, just so you know, the audience for my stream is mostly conspiracy theorists, so-called. And, you know, the moment you brought up Charlie Kirk, most of them left because they just assume you're a normie bozo. And then he went on to say that, oh, well, actually, he has been looking at conspiracies since the 80s. And it's like, okay, man, but then why are you talking to me like all this stuff's real? Right? But then why did I accept his version, at least for the purposes of the conversation, which shows on some level we meaning the individuals that comprise these various cliques and social groups within society, and, you know, ideologies and peer groups, you know, we all end up, and that's to be an agent of the system. That this is the idea of everyone is system agent or cisagent, which is how I introduced the concept. You're welcome, Truth Community. How many new concepts how much innovation in the space has old Benton introduced? But the concept of, well, then if the performance is as a system agent or a cisagent, then there's a context of performance. And why not take advantage of the ability to perform in a dissident fashion? And real quick to define dissident, because it is important. Dissident, one moment. Yes, he's reading the fucking dictionary to the stream again. Dissident. Adjective, not the noun form. In a manner that disagrees, dissenting, discordant. So the context of disagreement would be the system itself. So it's to, and this is the alchemy, is to function and to know, and this is also ties in with Krishnamurti and the first and the last freedom, and I've read portions of that book on stream. It's to understand within myself that I'm, and this is going to tie into the war within, this, and I'm going to get to the spiritual war within, hopefully. This may be a longer stream than normal, perhaps, who knows? Or maybe even necessitating a part two. But it's to understand that the being is functioning as a systems agent because there's no choice in the matter, realistically, because it's not possible to completely divorce oneself from society as much as that may be desirable. That can't happen. Even if well, it doesn't even matter, but it's just simply can't happen. So to do it in a manner that disagrees with the system itself or represents subversion. And if anybody remembers this Dave Ramsey video I played recently, Dave Ramsey himself ended the video by saying that's subversive in describing an employee who believed himself to be entitled to a bonus, but the bonus was profit sharing, but the management had failed to properly explain that, you know, this is not a bonus that you receive every year, this is a profit sharing. But because of the fear and the way the business wants to portray itself, it doesn't want to admit that, well, there could be a possibility of a break-even year, or God forbid, a year in which the company's not profitable. So there was a year where nobody got what they viewed as their bonus. Well, one of them, who probably is a leader and a key player, said, well, if you do that to me again, I'm out of here. And Dave lost his shit when he heard about this. He said, I would have fired that guy on the spot, because Dave is not going to have dissidents. He's not going to have one of his agents that he pays and operates. Dave Ramsey operates his team. See, he's the shot caller. He's not going to have somebody who he invests in with his resources. They're not allowed to be subversive. And that's what this movie is going to be about, in part. It's going to be about people's own ability and desire, perhaps, to function in a subversive way, and as a dissident, you know. But this movie is going to help manage some of those tensions, from one battle to another. I hate that title, Paul Thomas Anderson, in the context of revolution, because clearly this idea that, oh, civil war's brewing, and this fellow I talked to on stream the other day, the IRL, IRL, he seems convinced there's going to be a civil war. And the moment he starts talking that way, he's functioning as an agent of the system, whether he knows it or not. And if there's going to be a civil war, it's going to only ever benefit the system, because it must be reconciled through Kaczynskiism, Uncle Ted's writings. It has to be, right? Which are so dense that I couldn't even get through I couldn't even hardly get through a third of industrial society and its future. It's so energy draining to even try to read that aloud, right? Really, I would need to read it aloud separately, record it, and then play it back, while I rest or whatever. Now, because the readings I've heard of it on YouTube, I just don't like the way they read it. Give me a moment. We need to gather the thoughts here of the royal we. Probably time for a bathroom break. I'll try to keep yapping if I can, but give me a moment. We'll check in with the chat. And my stopping point is I need to read the definition of subversion when I come back. Let me actually bring that up on the phone before I forget. Might have to play that Dave Ramsey clip, possibly. Although, might need to play the Fight Club clip first. And this is what I mean. Is, see, in the motel streams, I could already have outlines and notes. So what happened in the hotel streaming is, more often than not, I would prepare notes, and not always, but there would be the inspiration of first waking up, note taking, maybe a rough outline, and then to already pull up the tabs on my computer to be ready to play the content, and to already have it queued up to a certain time code, right? To already have these things, and to be just bam, bam, bam. And so that it is producible, the person doing the broadcast can also produce the broadcast, but then to try to do it here from a car on a series of phones, it's too much, and I would need some version of a producer, which is probably not in the cards, and that's okay. And, I'm not planning on using the AI. So just like I took one look at, there's certain technologies like TikTok, I'm just never going to use it. And, I'm, unless, again, I won't say never say never. I always end up doing that. But most likely I won't ever be on TikTok, or I won't ever watch TikTok. But, same thing with this AI, although I've already used it for thumbnails just out of curiosity and entertainment. So see, I've already backslid on, but most likely I won't be using it in the way that other people will be using it, sort of in their jobs, or to search for jobs, or see how quickly it's tied directly in with employment and business immediately. See, and this is how this place is set up. But yes, subversion. Okay, it's on the screen. Anyway, give me a moment. Probably have to mute up real quick, but we're not going anywhere. We're not going anywhere. Man, that dark chocolate's kicking, Bo. This is good. Good times. All right, we're back. Thanks for hanging out. Appreciate you. And so let me read subversion. And So again, to alchemize and to transcend the limitations of the reality that it's probably not possible to function outside of a context of a systems agent. Unfortunately, the way this place is designed with the mind control and the psychology, designed by antithesis and installed and operated, via Moloch's machine. Where did my flashlight go? Oh, there it is. Where's my phone? There it is. And okay, subversion, the act of subverting, overturning, flipping from beneath. The act of overthrowing a government or a ruler, dethronement, the condition of being subverted, a systematic attempt to overthrow a government by working from within, undermining. See, it's not possible to overthrow it by working from within. And that is, so Antifa is subversive by nature. But if you reconcile it with Kaczynski, there's no reason to fear Antifa because they can't. Meanwhile, maybe I would like to see the system overthrown. Meanwhile, the people who are here are under such heavy mind control that we, meaning the populace, would merely recreate, what's already here, but it would be a less degenerated version initially, probably, right? Maybe a so-called golden age or enlightened age of enlightenment. And then subvert real quick. Let's go to subvert. Oh, man. Yeah, subvert, verb, to overturn from the foundation, to overthrow, to ruin utterly. So in the context of the performance as a systems agent, I can absolutely, because of having direct access to the performer in the context of the performance, I can ruin the way that the system is using me. I can ruin it. I can subvert that performance. However, because of the mathematics of John Nash, game theory optimal, the system will actually on the fly adjust for this, right? And in fact, it will predict and understand that there are subversive elements in society, and it will account for that, and it will actually use them to its own advantage. And then it does sort of become this poker game of incomplete information, if that makes sense. Game theory optimal based on the mathematics of John Nash. And again, the games of lies, right? And it's never a dull moment out here as a result. And this is one of my own unique contributions to the so-called truth community, because if there's other people who understand these concepts in the way that I do, nobody's saying it. I don't hear anybody verbalizing it. Maybe they're keeping it a secret for their own manipulative purposes. I don't know. Either way, it doesn't even matter. But I think I do want to play this Fight Club video because it is apropos of the fact that I'm now asserting that a man needs a war, but it doesn't have to be a conventional war. But then how much of conventional warfare, whether or not it really happened in the context of official fiction history, or it did happen, but it happened in a different fashion. And then it does make sense. The Old Testament is more or less based on man and war and God as a God of war and all of these things in some ways. But then again, that isn't the Old Testament to me is an acknowledgement of the satanic ritual abuse, MK Ultra mind control that's layered into the reality itself, so-called the realm itself. It's layered in there because what that is, the Jehovah or the God of the Old Testament, who does spill over into the New Testament to some extent, and then even the prophecies of Revelation, and also spills over into the writings of the Apostle Paul. And that was to me, that's the major problem with, one of the major problems with Christianity is that it utilizes Paul to combine these elements of the Old Testament with the teachings of the Lord Christ Jesus from the Gospels through man's law. Because Jesus, in the context of his performance in the Gospels, he had to reconcile that with the law as written in order to continue the performance long enough to achieve the objective, which was what? Sacrifice, but not in the way that Christianity perpetuates. It's a different sacrifice. It's not to have died for our sins so that via a religion people, so-called, so that so-called sins, so that people could be redeemed, but in the future in a judgment. Well, you're telling me in time, space, location, place only exists here. So how is there this timeline of judgment in all of this? See, this realm with religion, it needs there to be that timeline to push it off into the future and say, hey, be a good little boy now, and your rewards lie in the future. It's like, no, wait a minute. Heaven or hell is right now, here, right now. I'm the value. I'm the substance. What I am is the value. What I am is the substance. And if that's the case, which it is, via the mechanism of unlocking the achievement of true knowledge of self, that means Benton has access to what he is in real time, which has to be reconciled with waking dreams to realistic notions of unreality at the level of, well, time, space, location, place they only exist in relation to what I am. See? And then the mind fuck of all of that. And then the intelligence required within to even parse all of that out enough to not get lost in the motherfucking sauce. And that's a war. See, it's the war within, and it's the battle is the forces of what this realm is doing to muddy the waters and to sow so much confusion. See, the realm itself went to war with what you are from day one, if you are what I am. It's already gone to war with you, but you're in your most weakened state, having been born a helpless babe, sacrificed to Moloch. Again, if you are what I am. I can't tell you about you. See? What I can say is, if you are what I am, if your birthright is the same as my birthright. See? Representative of supreme authority and blessing itself. And symbolically within a realm that makes an enemy of what that is, what that represents symbolically. See? And to accept fully at the level of healing my motherfucking colon. Thank you, Lord Jesus, for the healing. Right? That continues up until this very moment, is to accept all of this and then to alchemize and to transcend and move beyond. And I'm here to tell you, if you are what I am, you can absolutely do this. But you can't do it in the way that I've done it within myself, because that's particular to me. Because remember, this is all in the context of the idea that it's even possible to individuate an indivisible force. See? The one, the most super intelligent power and force of love and creation, which can't be individuated. So only that's the moment that creative force imagines that it's possible to individuate. Now, poof, this place magically appears via delusion. But it appears based on the machinations of antithesis. And that's where the book of Job is so important. And that's what people who want to make fun of Benton don't grasp, or if they grasp it, they're pretending not to grasp it. And certainly the demons that may inhabit certain individuals would grasp it. Those high-level demons would grasp it. But that's, thankfully, old Benton don't have a dog in that hunt. So now we're inching ever closer to the war within. And hey, old Benton, in order to perform as an actual man with some balls and some testosterone, and able to stand up for himself in this place, he needs a war, right? Just like Arnold Schwarzenegger needed a war to make himself into Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he did it through bodybuilding. But first, to utterly destroy whatever was there. And so this is where we see a lot of these psychological problems, especially with the incels, so-called, and that's a very specific thing. And then like this Joker movie, right? This Joker movie, because these males are not facilitated or even really allowed authoritatively to access war. And that is the lesson of Fight Club. And people, in a way, and people got the wrong notion of this in Fight Club, and that's what the content creator hits on. Whether he understands it or merely implies it accidentally, he seems to understand this, and that it's in fact these repressed elements within society. And then to tie it back into the college football, which I would like to get into, as much as the people here are not sports fans. Guess what? I used to be, I'm not now. But even now we're seeing the Deep South is losing these elements, right? of this is, you know, one of the most common ways to make a boy into a man, because there can't always be a very serious war going on, and to also have an America built up at the level of business and infrastructure. See, that's probably why there hasn't been a whole lot of war going on over here, right? But maybe there will be at some point. But you know, and that explains the Ozzie and the Harriet and the Leave It to Beaver. Is the system for its own purposes saw fit to indoctrinate and mind control the masses, that it operates, you know, by extension through psychological control into building up the system of things, building up the infrastructure through business and industry. And then people have mistakenly said, well, oh, that's because of people were just better back then. No, they weren't. They're just as mind controlled as the people now. Now, arguably, the people now suffer more, but guess what? They suffered back then too. And people in a Gen Z will never relate to, hey man, if you want to go back to 1955, that's great, but you're not taking your funky hairstyle, whether your hair's colored or not. You're not taking your spiky hair, your faux hawk. You're not taking your piercings. You're not taking your tattoos. You're not taking your kicks. You're not taking your whip. No, you're gonna put on the same clothes everybody else puts on. You're gonna style your hair exactly like all the other boys. You're gonna behave exactly like all of the other children. Your father's gonna behave exactly like all the other fathers. That's You can't separate the bad from the good, and people can't reconcile for this. They can't solve for it within an equation, and that's the failure of the internal bootstrapping. Is why can't they recognize it? Well, they don't want to see it because they think their preferences are important. People, and Moloch's machine has created a psychology via marketing and advertising where people have mistakenly fallen victim to the notion that their preferences mean anything in the context of a war. They don't. When the fucking enemy shows itself coming across, coming over the hill, everybody's preferences are out the motherfucking window. Yeah, you might prefer that the commander, so Abraham Lincoln probably preferred that his top commanders weren't drunks, but that's just who ended up being the best commanders. And at a certain point, I think it was Lincoln, and maybe this was on the Confederate side or both, he was like, some really good, and I may be misremembering the war, but some really good tactician, or it might have been the Vietnam, I don't know which war it was, doesn't matter, it might have been World War II. They were like, this one guy was a drunk, but he was performing so well that the commander-in-chief was like, hey, whatever he's drinking, find out what it is and send it to the rest of the commanders. And it was a joke. He didn't mean it literally. What he's saying is, hey, y'all need to figure out what he's doing right versus try to write me letters about how he's a drunk. Like, I don't really want letters about his drunkenness. And if you write me a letter about his drunkenness, I'm just going to write back, hey, why don't you ask him what he's drinking, and you go ahead and order up some of that, and I'll put it in the budget. You can just, when you're ordering what you need for your camp, canvas, you need a spare canvas tent, and you need, a new assistant and all that. Just go ahead and put, whatever type of booze this is. And, it's like kidding, not kidding, on that level. So it's all preference is out the window. Yeah. Lincoln or whoever probably preferred a not drunk commander. So what? He's trying to win. The man's got to win a war, right? Same thing with the war within. And this system gets a lot of mileage out of playing upon your preferences. Well, part of Benton, going to war within, throw the preferences out the motherfucking window. Who cares? Anyway, I'm going to play this and shut up. And it's just the audio, but it's on my post tab if anybody wants to check it out. I think it's the second. It's the only one about Fight Club that's recent. Yeah, second to read. And again, just looking at this thumbnail again, there's 0% chance I ever would have. It says the Fight Club lie. You're not Tyler Durden. If I hadn't seen this on the video tab of a channel that I had already proven to me that it can make really good, intelligent content, I never would have clicked on this. But anyway, give me a second, and we'll play it.
And give him perfect.
Hang on, we got to go back.
Here's a magic trick. Create a character who's clearly insane. Make him burn people with chemicals. Make him punch himself in the face. Make him start a cult. Make him turn skyscrapers into smoke signals. Then, give him perfect abs. Watch what happens. 1999, the death rattle of a century choking on its own excess. Men in cubicles, men in khakis, men with ergonomic keyboards and carpal tunnel, men who know 40XL shortcuts but can't change a tire. A generation raised by cable TV and IKEA catalogs.
Well, and real quick, this was me back then, except I could change a tire because, was born into a time warp.
Designer clothes, exfoliating scrubs, hair products with names like...
Oh, and I wasn't a metrosexual, but broadly this is... But forget about me. Let's listen to it. We made 47 seconds and I'm pausing it, so my bad.
And putty. Men suddenly obsessing over thread counts and cuticles. Men starved for meaning while drowning in comfort. Masculinity outsourced. Manhood as a monthly subscription box. No Nazis to punch, no bread lines to stand in, no moon to reach. Just Monday morning meetings and Friday happy hours at Chili's. Existential angst masked by cologne that smells like crushed rainforests. The week's biggest win? Finding the last parking spot at Trader Joe's on a Sunday. Cultural castration. Male pattern self-loathing. Then, a body emerges like a warning, silhouetted against the yellow flickering basement light. You know the scene. Concrete floor sweating, grime on the walls. The kind of place where hope goes to get its teeth knocked out. That dangerous, stripped-down, predatory body steps out. A body that says, I don't exfoliate, I don't moisturize, I don't give a shit. Every man watching feels the same gut punch recognition of something.
Well, sorry to pause. This is me at the Whole Foods. And the women won't leave me alone. See? Because I don't give a shit. And it's a specific thing. And that's not the goal. It's a response to what society has temporarily made males into.
Surrendered. That body's a receipt for everything lost. Every man measuring the distance between what he sees and what he is. The body as protest sign. The male form as middle finger. A declaration of war against everything soft, safe, and approved by focus groups. The last call before the century ends, before towers fall, before everything reboots. The perfect moment for men to panic about what they've become. Bodies change in jolts and convulsions. Evolution doesn't knock. It kicks down the door at 3 a.m. and pisses in the gene pool. Rewind to the 1980s. Schwarzenegger, Stallone, biceps inflated like government lies. Masculinity as nuclear deterrent. Too big to fail, too massive to question. Steroid sculptures wrapped in anabolic rage, red, white, and blue. Then came Van Damme, Belgian export, ballet with blood spatter. Wesley Snipes, Blade, darkness wrapped in black leather and sharp edges. Muscle as murder, not magazine covers. An optical illusion that moved like liquid mercury poured over obsidian. Keanu Reeves, The Matrix, Neo, the body as question mark. A body that whispers instead of shouts, not imposing, doesn't dominate space. He moves through it, around bullets, through code, not overbuilt, present, aware, capable. Mel Gibson, Braveheart, body smeared with mud and blood, function over flash, the suggestion that masculinity exists outdoors, in conflict, in dirt, blue-collar brawn. And before all of them, Bruce Lee, 5'7", 135 pounds, motion as water, stillness as stone, the body as argument with no rebuttal, too efficient, too honest, too much. An Asian man injecting new masculinity into American veins, still clotted with John Wayne platelets. The right messenger with the wrong passport. The industry still craving testosterone wrapped in apple pie. Hollywood couldn't digest it without cultural antacids. But the genetic code was written, the template uploaded, the future already, past tense. Male icons evolved through borrowing, through theft, through silent adaptation. The influences hide in plain sight. DNA's smudged fingerprint, a virus spreading sideways. By the late 90s, the roid freaks were fading, deflating balloons of synthetic manhood. Audiences craving something that looked achievable by humans not injecting horse hormones. Something shaped by purpose, not protein powder. Earned, not engineered. A body carved by absence, defined by what's missing.
And sorry to break up the flow, but it's 2025 now and women are injecting the horse hormones. No bullshit.
Not added. And then, bam, the blueprint Xeroxed, the prophecy fulfilled. Bruce Lee's ghost reincarnated, repackaged, remixed and resold for a generation that never met him. Perfectly timed progress updated for mass consumption. Every office drone who saw it thought the same thing. I want that. Every desk jockey sees it and thinks, that could be me. Let's dissect this specimen. 5'11", 155, 5% body fat. Rebellion boiled down to skin and bone, the minimalist equation of less equals more. More threat, more sex, more envy. Not comic book hulks inflated with gas station dick pills and Mexican cow juice. A different beast entirely. This body never begged, never validated parking, never apologized for existing. Moved like it owned space and carried history. Not mass, but menace. Granite cut, nicotine-stained imperfection. Its asymmetry, its anger. A body with resume, with scars. Most men build plumage, not weapons. Instagram mannequins, selfie specialists, hashtag hoarders. Muscles for clicks, not punches and kicks. Gallery meat. Peacock or predator. One's decoration, one's destruction. The gym explosion wasn't about different bodies, but different realities. The attainment of sinew for sovereignty. Men trapped in wage cages they hate, buying shit they don't need. Men who apologize when someone else bumps into them. Men who need permission slips signed in triplicate from their domestic supervisors for Saturday morning golf. The trapdoor out of cubicle hell. The body as escape hatch from modern life. This new blueprint offered no retirement plan, no Windsor knots, no Saturday pilgrimages to hardware megastores, no smiling nuclear family portraits on the desk, no therapist appointments, no pharmaceutical management of feelings, no property debt anxiety, no property at all. A life without compromise. Men who wanted to walk into rooms and have the air change, wanted to make eye contact with strangers and have the strangers look away first, wanted to speak and have people shut up and listen. The best grifters don't sell miracles, they sell maybes. This body wasn't superhuman, it wasn't green screened. Not a roid-blooded cartoon turning your testicles into raisins. It looked like something you could become if you hated yourself enough, if you punished yourself enough. Potential for a price. No one asked why, everyone asked how. You pause the tape, you zoom in, study his abs. Within days the internet hemorrhages. Search terms spike, forum posts, headlines, variations of insane guy's workout routine. Psychologists call this missing the fucking point. Satire dies the moment it becomes attractive. Insanity becomes desirable shirtless under decent lighting. The message twists into the monster it mocked. A message about rejecting physical ideals becomes the most pursued physical ideal of a generation. The snake eats its own tail, chokes, dies, gets a six-pack in the process. You've seen this loop before. It's clockwork. Wall Street assholes with Gordon Gekko posters. Frat boys quoting Scarface. Divorced dads ink Heisenberg, cause cooking meth beats mortgages and alimony. The warning sign becomes the wish list. The skull and crossbones becomes the advertising logo. The toxic waste symbol becomes the energy drink brand. We take the grenade and wear it as jewelry. The great lie, that a body is something you achieve rather than something you endure. Men who were never going to be Arnold suddenly thought they could be Brad. They were wrong about that too. Men buy in, not for health, not for function, because it seemed...
Well, and see, that's a key point there is men who knew they could never become Arnold Schwarzenegger thought they could turn themselves into Brad Pitt from Fight Club. They can't because they will not go to war with themselves. And that's the point of this guy's, part of the point of his series on Arnold Schwarzenegger was that Schwarzenegger accomplished that and is still considered the greatest bodybuilder by most because he went to war with himself as often as necessary. And he was never not willing to go to war with himself, regardless of how he felt about it.
Reach. Because maybe, with enough obsession, it wasn't just fantasy. To resemble a hallucination. A body dreamed up only in the fever dream of a fictional character who never existed. The perfect metaphor for modern masculinity, chasing something never real to begin with. Funnier punchline, we know this and keep chasing anyway. Meal plans, macro calculations, chemical assistance, famine packaged as wellness. 5% body fat, skin stretched over steel, organs gnawing themselves, a skeleton wrapped in hate, starvation sold as grit, self-destruction with a fan club. Go ahead, count your almonds, 8, always 8, the math of hunger. At 5% body fat, your brain's a hostage devouring itself. Your thoughts orbit around food. Your balls quit. Your dick becomes decorative. You shiver in summer heat. The body type that said...
What he's describing here is exactly what I went through because of my illness. I fucking shiver. I was cold as fuck. Nothing going on downstairs because I was in semi-starvation because I could not assimilate the fucking nutrients. I couldn't get enough calories, right? And I couldn't eat enough food. had no appetite.
I break myself better than you ever could. The character preaching total annihilation, not six-pack stomachs, complete surrender to chaos, the death of who you think you are, not a better you, no you at all. Picture the perfect untethered man. No skincare routine, no tracking macros on MyFitnessPal, no posting before and after photos with fortune cookie captions. He's a lit fuse laughing at the entire concept of self-improvement. In his world, your gym membership's just another way to lie to yourself about control. Your meal plan's denial. Your selfies? Narcissism with the timestamp. He offered freedom from your reflection, an antidote to treadmill purgatory. But you're still posing, still tweaking filters, still staring at yourself in gym mirrors, still flexing in bathroom selfies, still wondering why your abs don't look like his. 25 years later, still blind to the gag, still deaf to the laugh. Life's supreme twist. Men watching anti-consumerist manifestos with shopping lists. See also, cognitive dissonance. See also, pathological blindness. Your spiritual awakening derailed by vanity. The middle finger misread as a pointing finger saying, this, be this, buy this, become this. Capitalism's greatest trick? Selling the rope to hang itself. Rebellion, now available with free expedited 2-day shipping. Anarchy in 3 easy payments. Memento Mori becomes the lifestyle hashtag. You can download the anti-capitalism app for $4.99. Critical thinking murdered by aesthetics. Revolution reduced to a t-shirt. Our spiritual war repackaged as fitness goals. We're walking lab rats of predictable psychology, pressing our own shock buttons. A character screams identity's a prison, your body's just meat, stop caring what others think, self-improvements, masturbation. The very next day, you're doing crunches on your bedroom floor. Men packed into gyms lifting to Magic Ghost who hated lifting. Looney bin logic. We don't want to destroy identity, we want to upgrade to the premium package. Thinking we're Tyler when we're not even the narrator. We're the space monkeys. Obedient puppets following orders disguised as rebellion. Fanboys in tank tops thinking they're ditching the system with its playbook in hand. The trap works because the mirror shows what we already want. The animal doesn't enter the cage because it's stupid. It enters because there's food inside. The cage offers something it desperately wants. Men don't idolize a toxic character because they misunderstand. They idolize him because they understand perfectly. Because they see themselves, not as they are, but as they wish they could be. Consequence-free, responsibility-free, care-free. A better cage with abs. The joke's still laughing. The punchline never stops punching. You wanted freedom from the machine? You volunteered to become the gears. Given the choice to wake up, we hit snooze and dream of vascularity. Given a mirror that shows the truth, we only check our serratus. The men who watched that movie and immediately bought dumbbells weren't missing the point. They were making it, completing the circuit, validating the hypothesis. A generation of men learning how to pray, on their backs, doing crunches. You'll never have that body, but you'll exhaust your life chasing it. And somewhere in the chase, somewhere between the protein shakes and the self-loathing, you might find something else. Your own shadow, your own ghost, your own hallucination. Yourself. You're not your job. You're not your car. You're not your fucking khakis. But those abs, you'd still kill for them.
Damn. Nailed it. Wow. Amazing. Yeah, bravo, sir. And again, I like to tie that in with the idea of these YouTube channels as a business, because he has to catch the algorithm, so he marketed that video in a specific way to get views. And I just happened to find it through another one of his videos. And what's he got? 14K subs, and that had 5.5K. You know, if with just some random artsy fartsy, who gives a fuck thumbnail and you know, title, that's a, you know, maybe 500 to 800 view video, right? Maybe. That hardly anybody would ever see. And that's, you know, my channel in a way is to understand, well, nobody's really going to see this. Versus if I had to make a specific amount of money, you know, and then my own inability to do so, right? I just don't know how to make the money on here and don't want suggestions. You know, that's not the point. And people say, oh, we're shadow banned because we're truthers. Well, that's not the point. You know, it's still possible to, you know, there's got to be a way to disseminate the content. There's always a way, especially as a business. YouTube's trying to make business. It's not a shadow banning. People aren't held back. They're just not pushed forward. So this truth community stuff, my streams are, at least YouTube claims, they are pushed out to certain folks. But then, because if they click on my stream, they don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, because I put almost no effort into properly framing these things for people who are experiencing it for the first time. And I know I'm doing that, and it's fine, right? Now, maybe I could learn to do prepared videos that over time would bring people to the channel, perhaps. I don't know. There's also there's always a chance for word of mouth over time. It's just, food for thought, something to think about. Anyway, but really what I realized, it's something I already knew, but it's a good way to remind myself of this. Men need that war, and they need something to go to war with. And society is structured to not let them go to war with themselves. And what he's talking about, and to also not give them a war unless the system needs them to go to war. But now they're going to go to war alongside women and gay dudes and trans people, which I guess maybe that's changing, and that's not going to be the case. But it's still, the women are there, right? Now, if it was MAGA and it was right wing, why are women going to war? And people say, well, they've always gone to war. I'm talking about troops. Why are there going to be women troops? Why are there already women troops? See, and I'm not against it. I say if a woman wants to go to war, let them go to war. Who cares? But that's me, who's always been historically more liberal than the rest of you, right? So meanwhile, now what's just accepted at the normal, as normal with MAGA or so-called right wing or so-called conservative is, oh yeah, of course women serve in battle and serve as military, like helicopter pilots or whatever. And I'm saying, well, I never would have had a problem with that, but then historically I've been amongst probably more liberal than anybody who comes to this channel historically. But then now the people who think they're conservatives they've internalized those notions. Well, some will say, well, yeah, women shouldn't be cops. Women shouldn't be in the military because they're bad at it. And I'd say, well, yeah, but you're describing half the males, unfortunately. Half the males also shouldn't be cops and also shouldn't go to war because they're bad at it. Meanwhile, there's at least one really badass female state trooper in Arkansas, but she still can't do everything the males can do. But she's really fucking good at her job, and I never want to prevent somebody who wants to go do a dangerous job and who's good at the dangerous job. I don't want to prevent them from their opportunity. That's where I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the fact that, oh, look at how terrible these women are at being cops. Look at how bad these men are at being cops. What's the fucking difference? How about just let's not have bad cops? Meanwhile, occasionally, and they're all bad. I mean, I'm just saying good at their job. Good at serving the corporations, but yeah, there are women who do a good job. There are men who do terrible jobs. There are women who do terrible jobs, right? Meanwhile, what's the only reason for police is to make it less likely that the weakest people in society will be preyed upon. The cops are never going to show up and protect me. That's never going to happen. The only reason to have police, other than the corporate functions, of course, the so-called keeping of the peace, is because the people in your life that can't fend for themselves, whoever would prey upon them needs to at least be de-incentivized at the level of, well, maybe they don't want to go, maybe they're on parole or probation and they don't want to go back to prison yet, right? Or they don't want to deal with a court case right now. So they might see your grandmother or your grandfather and think, okay, there's an easy prey, your disabled family member or whatever. But they'll say, no, I'm good because, I'm on paper or, whatever they've got going on in their life. See, that's the function that's the major function. Otherwise, I don't think police are necessary otherwise. Because what do otherwise? They serve the corporations, not the people. Again, they're never going to do anything for me, ever. And why would they? Because I'm going to take care of it myself. Okay. In fact, I'll do some of their functions at times, just naturally, right? And, again, have people reconciled any of this? I would say no, they haven't. But back to the war, the blessings of that spiritual war within. And the spiritual war is to go to war with oneself consistently enough and to rule over oneself with an iron fist in a way to really reconcile and deal with whatever's going on internally, to then kill the old, weak, passive, people-pleasing, go along to get along version, and then to allow whatever will grow in its place. See? And there's many ways to do that in the external, but it is an internal process. And the way that this guy described what Arnold Schwarzenegger went through with bodybuilding is that it's in his mind, and that he is still arguably the greatest of all time because of his mind. But his genetics, of course, a certain aesthetic, yeah, that's part of it. But other people have an aesthetic and genetics. It's also, even more importantly, is the mental. And somebody else we saw is Dorian Yates. And really, any of these top guys, they know how to go to war. And it's funny to see Jay Cutler, because I do watch some of his, if anybody knows this guy, it's the white guy who used to battle Ronnie Coleman. And he won, Jay's one of the rare people that won Mr. Olympia, lost the next one, and then regained his title. And it says a lot about his personality. And he talks about, he does podcasts now, and everybody wants to talk to him about food, and this ties in with the Fight Club thing where he's talking about the metrosexual aspects, where a lot of males now are foodies. They want to talk about food, and I enjoy food and nice restaurants, or at least nice food at times, but I'm not really that interested in talking about it. But Jay, anytime they ask him, he either demurs, or I saw one clip of him where he said he had to make himself force feed for so long that he says he doesn't enjoy eating at all. He said, I would rather not have to eat. He said, I don't enjoy food now at all. He said, I'm not into food. I don't like food. I don't think about food. He said, and it's because he had to eat insane amounts of food every single day. And I did my own smaller version of that, and it didn't make me not want to eat food, but I know what he's talking about. I made myself eat 5,500 calories a day for 4 straight years, and that is the war. Like, that is a form of war, is to do a thing past the point where, hey, I'm hungry because I'm lifting weights, but because for some reason when I hit the weights, my appetite goes off the fucking charts, but it's still eating when I might not want to eat. It's still like, oh, I might want to go do something with my friends, except I got to make sure I go eat. Like, oh, I'm on my way to work, and I'm hungrier than normal, and I came from the buffet, but now I'm about to work my, a busy shift at the Outback where there's only going to be time to steal bacon off the line, right? I'm not going to have time to eat during the shift, so, and I wasn't eating clean back then, of course, and, look, I'll just grab 2 Chick-fil-A chicken sandwiches because they're next door, and I'll just eat, I'll make that into one gigantic chicken sandwich, and I'll fucking crush that right before work, right? I did this for years. And then dinner so I went from the buffet where I met my second wife, where I had a gigantic lunch every day, to at Ryan's Steakhouse, and then, to maybe needing a snack of 4 fucking chicken patties on 2 pieces of bread, to every night I either had ribeye steak, broccoli, no butter, although in retrospect I should have put the butter on it, and then dry baked potato, or if I needed to change it up, rack of ribs, that's like 2,500 calories, just a rack of ribs, full rack, because I got half off, full rack of ribs. And I forgot what sides I'd get, probably the broccoli, but probably skip the baked potato. I don't know. I don't remember, actually. I highly doubt I would have crushed a rack of ribs and a baked potato. I did this every day, right? For fucking years. But then, how much of that contributed to ruining my own digestion, And then how much of that is what's replaced that Benton is this Benton who's 140 pounds and, all of this. It's interesting. Can the being, so the same being that probably had body dysmorphia to try to become as big as possible, can that same person walk around at 140 pounds and not give a fuck? It's like, yeah, that's kind of part of what that video is talking about, is actually it's the attraction to not caring that people, on some level know I'm not taking showers. It's probably an attraction to not giving a flying fuck if my, shoes I bought a month ago or, now they're getting dirty and I'm not going to clean them because who cares? Fuck that. Not giving a fuck that people can tell I've been wearing the same pair of pants for 5 days in a row. Who cares? It doesn't fucking matter. And again, Fight Club, to let that which does not matter truly slide, right? Who cares? What's the difference? In 20 years, people aren't going to remember Epstein. They already don't remember the 08-09 crisis. Who the hell's going to remember in 20 years that hey, there was that weird guy walking around speaking a bunch of seemed like crazy nonsense. Meanwhile, it turns out, if anybody remembers what I was talking about, he was right on the money, of course, with the benefit of hindsight, if anybody has a memory. And oh yeah, he also didn't take showers and slept in a car. Who cares? And to alchemize the not showering, to alchemize the lack of comfort of sleeping in a car. I don't even notice that this isn't comfortable anymore. I don't even notice because I'm used to it. Meanwhile, I used to live in an apartment. I grew up in a nice house. I grew up with these things. It makes us weak. So how's the only way to get to strength? The society's not going to force it. The society is going to do everything it can to keep especially the males weak and pacified and comfortable. Meanwhile, what do we see the women doing? Building fucking muscles, and they're taking the horse hormones far beyond what the men are nowadays. And then they talk about, and I talked with my drunk friends yesterday about because I mentioned something. We got to talking about women, and I talked about this Brock Lesnar's daughter, and I said I think she looks good. I mean, I love women. Like, I actually like women, so she is feminine. Whether somebody chooses to see her femininity or not, it's there. I've listened to her speak. I've watched how she does her sport. Shot put. A woman can be feminine and go out there and throw a shot put farther than any of us will ever throw a shot put. That's for sure. And it's this idea of, it's this male thing around, if it came down to it, could she physically dominate? Of course she could. What are you talking about? Have you looked at her? Of course she could. But not psychologically, right? And so how much of these men building themselves up physically are dominated psychologically by women and are dominated by this system of things? Well, what Benton has made himself into can't be psychologically dominated by anybody or this system. Good luck anybody imposing their will on me. And is that not the spiritual warrior? Is that not the Christ warrior? Is that not the resurrection of the risen Christ within? Because you can say, Jesus performed a certain type of way. Yeah, and he, on some level, would have known that the way he was behaving, they were absolutely going to crucify him. And he continued on. If that's not badass enough, did he really need to have muscles and, and how much of his own war with himself or how much of his own war with his own flesh that he necessarily would have had to contend with was involved in eating less food, to not have a boner everywhere he went, to not have to contend with some of these things. I guarantee you people were trying to have sex with him. Do you think the Lord wasn't walking around, the Son of Man? Do you think people weren't trying to fuck him? I shaved my head in the park with my shirt off and people showed up trying to fuck me. I mean, I'm not exaggerating. This is what happened, right? And, all I got to do is start preaching on Jesus and the power in the name of the Lord Christ Jesus, and they go away, right? So yeah, people would have wanted to try to fuck Christ, except he wasn't about that life because he was living some type of way, and then, he would have presumably known it's okay, it's time to give a sermon. How many of those sermons were motivated by, hey, he was creeped out by how some of these perverts in the crowds that followed him everywhere were looking at him. I can tell when somebody's looking at me wants to fuck me, right? Not a fan. Not a fan. Not a fan. It's weird. It's creepy. Why are these people trying to fuck me? And it's not just here. It's other places too. It's just here they're a little more, aggressive, right? A little more aggressive. And then if they hear me preaching on Jesus, they're like, okay, well, we hear him preaching on Jesus, but let's tempt him. Let's see is he actually of, is he in this world but not of this world, right? Well, the flesh is of this world, right? So that's the war. That's the war within us, to go to war with those mechanisms, right? And part of that is it's the spiritual development. It's the spiritual warrior genius development of, hey, let's go out here and let's have a spiritual let's take the spiritual Pepsi challenge and watch me defeat every single one of you. Mano y mano. Meanwhile, society's competitions, it's not even mano y mano anymore. And I got women out here aggressively looking at me and staring me down from behind dark sunglasses, and it's not even mano y mano, because it can't be, because they're not equipped for a mano y mano, right? But they'll punk me if I let them. Well, I don't let people punk me. I never have, from day one. Apparently it happened at a very young age, and my big scary father said, well, you got to go stand up to those bullies, and I did, and it's been okay, no more bullying. See? And a male can make that choice at any age. A male can make that choice at any time. See? But then if you look at the incel, Elliot Rodger, and all of these things, a lot of that was simply that society would not allow him to express, right? And then you get into the repression of, sexuality being repressed. And then, so this idea that the so-called right wing wants to pretend like the left wing has no ideas whatsoever. Meanwhile, the right wing can't reconcile their own repressed homosexuality. See? They can't, because they can't accept that probably 20% of their sons and their peers and their church leaders and the people at their job are some level of repressed homosexuals, right? And I listened to that, and I don't think anybody listened to it probably, but on my post tab, it's where this Gen Z or millennial with the piercings and the funky hair, she did a video about how she dated and married a guy who was literally into Hitler. So I'm listening to her talk about when she met this guy and how he treated her. And I'm listening to her. I said, at a certain point, I said, oh, that's a gay dude. That's a gay guy. And then later on, he got mad at her and started comparing her to his ex. And she looked up his ex on social media as a trans person. And then she figured out eventually, oh, this is some version of a repressed homosexual gay guy who wouldn't even be in a relationship with her. And then actually Bex, if anybody knows Bex in the so-called truth community, she's realized this at a certain point, and certainly she was resentful of that there are males out here dating women and they're repressed homosexuals. I'm like, hey, yeah, absolutely, it's happening. That's a real thing that women deal with. It's fucked up because these MAGA people won't let that expression happen. But meanwhile, now you have Donald Trump's right-hand economic guy is a man married to a man. Meanwhile, what does the left do? The left, because they have to compete with the right wing, Kamala, in her book, apparently says that she was going to have Pete Buttigieg, Mayor Pete was going to be her running mate, except she thought she was so, but see, they have to run it through the gamut of intersectionality, which most of y'all don't understand. She said, well, I'm intersectional, meaning she's, multiracial and all of this, and with the feminism and the gender studies. So she didn't want to add a white dude who's also intersectional to that. She thought that would be too much. See? But then, because the right wing isn't acting on intersectionality, now Trump is free to have his right-hand man be a man married to a man. And they say the only reason Mayor Pete didn't become under Biden, the reason why he was the Secretary of Transportation, is because they were going to send him to China as a diplomat, but they didn't think the Chinese would deal with him married to a man. And meanwhile, America's portrayed as homophobic and racist, and we're not 1/10 of the homophobic and racism of China. Not we're not 1/100th of the racism and homophobia you see. So, and this is what I mean by there's no such thing as conservatism, because conservatism follows behind the progressive movement. And it's like the progressive movement is like a barge or a ship, and it's leading the way progressively. And then the the conservatives are in a boat behind that is, it has a rope tied to the boat in the front, and they're being towed along, and that distance stays the same. See, and so eventually you get people like Joe Rogan or Bill Maher or myself. Over time we'll seem to be conservatives when I've never been anything approaching what's passed for a conservative. But because I'm in a so-called truth community and I won't hide my opinions also, but I've never defined myself as either one. See? Do you see how it's all contextual and it's all situational? And people can't even process that nuance. They just think, oh, look, Adam Carolla from the San Fernando Valley, all of a sudden he's a conservative. No, he's not. He's the same thing he's always been, except, he's evolved some of his viewpoints. Same thing with Bill Maher. He's the same thing he's always been, right? Meanwhile, Hillary Clinton, Obama, Bill Clinton, all of these people did not support gay marriage, right? But they're liberal. Like, what are you talking about? Meanwhile, where's Trump on gay marriage? So what are we talking about? Like, it disproves itself as ridiculous. And of course, the mind-controlled masses just rush headlong because of status quo, social contract, and peer groups. That it's just they take it as accepted in order to get through the day, right? And that's chicken shit. And it's chicken shit because they won't go to war with themselves. If they went to war with themselves, they would just say, oh, yeah, well, I don't talk politics. I don't define myself on that basis. Or they would just say, yeah, well, I've noticed these inconsistencies. What about this? Now what? Or just like I say to you folks, hey, I'm not foolish enough to define myself as one of the two parties. But if you made me choose, it's never Republican. Just like I'll never use the big banks again. I took one look at what went on with Bush 43 and Cheney and said, no fucking way. So I'm out of any possibility of ever aligning myself with Republicans. Now, I would never align myself with Democrats. What I'm saying is if you make me choose, it's a negative motivation of, well, hell no. I'm not going along with Republicans. Are you crazy? Meanwhile, for the millionth time, where I'm from in the Deep South, nothing but Democrat governors from the late 1800s until 1968. And I mean nothing but Democrat governors. Oh, but now all of a sudden it's the reddest of the red. How does that make any sense? And my home county still votes Democrat, right? And if for some insane reason I moved back to Arkansas, I probably would end up in my home county, because if I wanted to go earn a living, I would go live in Northwest Arkansas where Walmart is. But I don't like those people. That's a culturally distinct area of Arkansas, and I'm not from that culture. And there's a whole bunch of people not from Arkansas that have moved there. I don't want nothing to do with it. And my bozo family has all moved to the Ozarks, where it's nothing but white people, and I like diversity. I grew up in a diverse environment. I don't want to be where it's nothing but weirdo white people. We're weird, white folks. Now, unfortunately, these other groups have become weird. But we're weird. We just are. I mean, can we accept that we're weird? And black folks are weird now. And black folks and white folks ain't that dissimilar. We're really not. Yeah, there's some cultural differences, but when you see the black people becoming weird, that's a really bad sign for society. And I watched this coach Greg Adams, and that's what he tells his almost exclusively black audience. He's talking about, they want to date and be on these apps. And he said, y'all are weird. He said, y'all don't realize, especially the women, when these women are making these TikTok videos and they think they're entitled to a certain type of life and a certain type of man. And they're like, look, he's telling the audience, y'all aren't accounting for the fact that in relation to the people you want to have a relationship with, you're fucking weird. And that's fine, except, they're unable to accept the weirdness in their potential partners. Like, I've been weird since day one. So what's the difference? There's really no difference. I've always been strange and odd and weird. Never creepy, though. That's the key to weirdness and to being an oddball. Can't ever be creepy. As we know, there's plenty of creeps out here. And the creeps can't really hide. And the thing about the repressed homosexuality is everybody sees it almost instantaneously. Now, the right can't see it because it's repressed. Because why? Because they won't accept that given the right circumstances, it's probably possible for any male to maybe temporarily see something in another male that they might fancy a little bit. Oh my God, the horror, right? And that must be repressed. It can't be reconciled. It can't be dealt with. Well, that's bullshit. That's chicken shit. And I'm going to let that have power over me? That's insane. How can I be this badass spiritual warrior and grow and change and evolve and overcome all of this, and I can't even contend with some, you know, something of the flesh that is probably more learned than normal and natural, but on some level is what? Probably, to deal with when men are off doing men shit in a context of a war and there's no women around, you know, and this idea of women getting taken advantage of in a war. Well, I mean, how much of that is to keep the men from having to go at each other, right? And then, women as the spoils of war also, you know, and how much of that is not going to be a thing anymore with the drone warfare and the robot warfare and the mechanisms and the technology war and all of this, and women on testosterone and men not making it, men's bodies not producing testosterone, not getting the flood of testosterone in the womb anymore, not really having these masculine characteristics. And now I'm seeing YouTube videos about why did men of the 70s and 60s look so old at a given age? It's the testosterone. It's called virilization. And in order to procreate, the competition for procreation, a lot of that revolves around the woman being attracted to masculine characteristics in order to have a son who will spread her genetics the farthest. So they had to masculinize, they had to virilize. And the food supply was set up to virilize the males, but not to virilize the women. But now we have food supply that it's inhibiting the ability of the males to make testosterone while simultaneously feminizing the women in ways where my baby sister had her first period, and I shouldn't know this, but I do, at around age 10, right? It's because of what's in the food, and it's because of what's in the environment. See? Yeah. This is fucked up. And it also allows, the system probably takes advantage of it through what? Well, as soon as the young women start bleeding, we know what's going to happen at some point, right? Like, this is just what happens, and it's not, you can have your opinion about it all you want. It is what it is. And then why are the female teachers sleeping with the 10 to 13-year-old boys? It's because women have to compete for Chad, and they have no choice. And the teachers, they have an advantage in competing for Chad's genetics. And if Chad, if there's one or two Chads in the class, and her body can tell that they have, their sperm works, she's going to get that sperm. It is what it is, man. I don't know what to tell you. That's the animalistic son of man flesh side of things. And it's not to excuse the behavior. It's to say these are unenlightened beings who, if they had ever faced and contended with these things, or if society forced them to face it and contend with it, then it would be dealt with properly. Society won't enable it to be dealt with. Society leaves it to us to deal with it, and we don't know how to deal with it. We don't know what to do about it other than to blame those people and say, oh my God, can you believe how fallen and wicked these people are? Yeah, I can. Because again, like Dick Gregory said, if God doesn't, and again, the Jehovah, the God of the Old Testament, if Jehovah of the Old Testament doesn't destroy this evil motherfucker, he owes that Sodom and Gomorrah an apology. Meaning this is off the charts compared to whatever that was. And you remember what they said in Sodom and Gomorrah, because I guess culturally, kind of like the Native Americans, it was normal to sort of just send out the daughters if they were virgins, because, biblical marriage is the man takes a virgin and then now it's his wife, but not his only wife. It's one of his wives potentially, because that was Chad taking a bunch of wives. And then the lesser males, it was like, okay, well, the less desirable daughters are still available at a certain age, and who can we get to? Let's have a dowry, and what incentive can we give to sort of arrange a marriage at this Chad knows that, why would Chad bother to get married? And now Chad needs to get married because he's going into a certain type of profession. But now we get to the notion of beards. Now we get to the notion of Charlie Kirk. Well, if Charlie Kirk's a repressed homosexual, and I'm not saying he is, but it's a pretty decent chance, if he's not brave enough, like this Scott Bessent character, to just live his life, right? And they say Scott Bessent supposedly punched Elon Musk in the face. They say recently he threatened somebody. He threatened to kick somebody's ass in a meeting. Well, is this not the type of gay dude who's just going to be like, yeah, he marries a man, and so what? That's a particular type of person, right? It's probably somebody you want on your team to some extent. He probably did punch Elon Musk in the face eventually. He's not going to, you think that guy is going to let Elon Musk bully him, right? And he's not going to marry a woman just so he can go into politics. He's going to marry a man and go into politics as a Republican, because he's going to say, well, I'm not going to be Pete Buttigieg and not be able to get these positions because the left wing is going to want it to be a diverse DEI intersectional hire. Pete Buttigieg is discriminated against by Democrats because he's a white male. See? Whereas Scott Bessent is Trump's right-hand man in economics, married to a man, punching Elon Musk in the face perhaps, and threatening people in meetings and saying, hey, we're going to go outside if you think you're going to talk to me like that. And if, a lot of us respect that on some level. I don't give a fuck who he, again, it's none of my, it's not important. Meanwhile, 30 years ago, people would have been wanting to beat me up if I said, well, who cares? They would have wanted to kick my ass. But now it's just completely fine. Oh, yeah, well, what are you going to do? They got rights too. Well, stop repressing it. Why does Charlie Kirk have to have a widow and two kids that are going to grow up without a father? Because he couldn't just live his fucking life. And he had to go to college campuses and all of this. And why do you think he's getting into it with the trans people? Do you think it's not something inside of him? And if he makes his living, preaching, invoking Jesus and wants to talk to what would Jesus do with the trans people if he was here? Would he go to college campuses and make the trans people so angry that they wanted to murder him? I don't think he would. He would be making the government want to murder him. Do you really think Jesus, were he here, would be behaving like Charlie Kirk, trying to do everything in his power to make the trans people want to murder him? I don't think so. I don't think Jesus would do anything to make the regular folks want to murder him. I think that if Jesus was here, the government would be forced to deal with him. Just like how I'm behaving, it will force the government to deal with me. But the way the government is going to deal with me is through surveillance and through mind control, such as when I was telling these people to their face in the streets of Los Angeles yesterday just what level of corporate slaves they are. The women, some of them, they have this mocking laugh they do. See, these lefty communistas walking down the street, two white girls walking down the street with a gigantic black man, don't care. I'm from Arkansas and was dating black women in the 90s. I don't know. Who cares? I don't give a fuck. And do whatever you want. I don't have a dog. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. My own sister had a kid by a Bolivian. My dad, who espouses racist rhetoric, doesn't give a fuck. He doesn't care that his grandson is Hispanic. He honestly, legitimately doesn't give a fuck. Because if we look at conservatives, individually, most conservatives don't give a shit. They just don't want their children confused at school, right? And they don't want their children potentially influenced. But meanwhile, discord is going to turn them into trannies. If the parents can't stop them, discord is going to turn them into trans people, right? So maybe if everybody knows what's going on, we have at least a chance of, there's always been freaks and weirdos. When I went to college in Arkansas in 1993, we had freaks on campus. And it is easy to say, hey, look, there's a freak walking across campus. And we didn't think, hey, man, there's a thing that's a threat to civilization. We need to address it. We thought, hey, there's a freak and we're probably not going to have anything to do with it. We're not going to invite it over to our party We're not going to invite it. And these weren't trans people necessarily. These were just, like, one of them was called Chain Man. He walked all around campus by himself with leather and chains all over his body. I don't know what the fuck was his deal was. I never bothered him. He walked around with purpose, like he didn't want nobody to talk to him. So you know what we did? We saw him and said he probably don't want nobody to talk to him, and nobody talked to him. Now maybe he was thinking, hey, why won't anybody be my friend? I don't fucking know. I have no idea. Now, if he was my roommate, and I probably would have, brought him out of his shell, or maybe he just really didn't want to talk to nobody, and I would have figured that out and just been like, all right, man, I see you don't want to talk to me, and I just would have been his roommate, and we just wouldn't have talked to each other. Who cares? That's called accepting people for what, that's called lovingly accepting somebody for how they present themselves. What would Jesus do? Would Jesus have gone to a college campus, set up a booth, and had debates with trans people? Does that sound like what the Lord Christ Jesus would have done? Meanwhile, you've got an entire religion of people, supposedly, who are venerating Charlie Kirk, who may very well have been a repressed homosexual and married to a beautiful woman with beautiful kids, and that's called a beard, right? But then that's not respectable. But then Trump's right-hand man in economics is a man married to a man who will apparently punch you in your face, which all of us respect on some level. And I can have the heart of an anarchist, and I can, have read all this lefty stuff, and know about these things, and be more, again, would never choose republicanism. But meanwhile, remember, Arkansas was historically very, very, very conservative, but also Democrat at the same time. Like, people haven't even solved for that yet. And Bill Clinton, tough on crime. Hillary Clinton, super predators. Like, what are we talking about? Bill Clinton balanced the budget one year. That sounds conservative to me. So, can we face the reality there's not a single conservative in government anywhere? Charlie Kirk was not a conservative because that doesn't exist at the level of performing conservatism, but he performed conservatism, in a very specific way. What's the relevance of that? And I'm ranting on politics, and my apologies. My apologies for ranting on politics. I'll stop. I'll stop now. Please forgive me. Thank you for liking the stream. Let's exercise a modicum of self-control, please. And, confess my own sin of temporarily too strongly identifying with the potential validity of this system of things, and repenting by stating my intention yet again to no longer engage in this behavior. Asking forgiveness, and in this moment forgiven as if it never happened. And, I caught myself much earlier than normal, so it is progress, right? To not get swept away in the gears of the machine, right? To not get swept away in the gears of the machine. All right, what time is it? It might be time to go. Let me see. At the risk of yurting the stream. All right, I'm out of here. I'm going to wrap up with some personal business. Well, let me check the notes and make sure I think I covered the spiritual war within. I believe I did. If not, I don't know what to say. I guess if anybody listening feels like I haven't, let me know in the chat. And we might be on to the Hate Watcher portion of the broadcast, so maybe it's the Hate Watchers down there. Don't know. If I can find my flashlight. But see, my body, my sensitive internal space is telling me that was a violation by going off into the Charlie Kirk. The first part of the Charlie Kirk stuff was completely appropriate, but then by the end of it, I can tell that I went off into left field, and my body's letting me know, hey man, don't do that. Pretty pleased with sugar on top. Knock it off. Yeah. And then, is one even able to have their own? I'll bring it back to something that matters for the individual in the war within. Like, what level of war within needs to happen for the individual to even be able to have their own discrete personal opinion of Charlie Kirk, the phenomenon, as portrayed in the media, right? Like, can the being even perform at that level, right? But yeah, and it is important to realize that man needs war, right? Man has a need to have a war or go to war, even if that war is with himself. And society increasingly, this is my opinion, society increasingly, while it used to facilitate these rites of passages and these needs of a male, even if it's just football or sports or competition, that's now being degenerated to the level of, it's going to be like college football is being turned into such a mockery of itself, and in my own, as a youth, my own love of the Arkansas Razorbacks and particularly the football team, well, it's just gone. The team, they're never going to be any good at football ever again, right? Which is fine, except there's a reason why a small, like tiny little states like Nebraska and Arkansas were able to rise up and defeat these, larger populated areas and even dominate at times. Nebraska even far beyond, but Arkansas at times was able to dominate the entire sport for brief periods, right? One of the original games of the century was number one Texas at number two Arkansas, or maybe it was number one Arkansas, I don't remember, but 1969, they call it the shootout. And it was the first time the sitting president ever attended a college football game. Nixon flew into Fayetteville, and then they helicoptered his ass onto the campus. And he attended the game because he was a huge college football fan. And in fact, when Hunter S. Thompson was able to hang out with Nixon, and a lot of people don't even know this lore around his Thompson's book, Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail 72, was some of that had to do with him hanging out with Nixon, and they were, what they had in common was that they both loved college football, right? And then this is a very masculine thing. Like, this would have been associated with masculinity at the time to even have an interest in this. Now, well, it's degenerated to the point where just now women, because it's a business, now women are football fans, right? Well, I've never met a single woman that knew anything whatsoever about football, and it's okay, right? It's fine. Who cares? But um, but they're being marketed to. So of course, the marketing plays into their notions and men's notions of wanting to view themselves some type of way, which ties into that Fight Club video that I played. That's on my post tab. See, it ties in because this is a subversion of humanity itself, right? And it's a subversion of the spirit of what I am, which does express what? Masculine characteristics, but not to the exclusion of feminine characteristics. So when I talk about loving women and loving even the femininity of Brock Lesnar's shot-putting daughter, right? It's that my own, and this is going to sound however it's going to sound, and I don't really care. The reality is Benton, as having a specific genetic bloodline, and sadly that probably is a bloodline that in the past has served this evil, wicked system of things to even have a famous grandfather for sports, right? And nobody picked up the mantle and carried on the tradition, probably because the system didn't need any of us to. Lord only knows that I'm the type of person, if my father had put his foot up my ass and drilled me into some sort of, and I don't know that that's what happened with my grandfather. I don't think it was, but um, I know some of my cousins that happened to them on some level. And I even had a cousin, they intentionally held him back a grade in school so he'd be bigger for football. Like, that was really a thing. It always sounded ridiculous to me. I was like, what are you talking about? But I would have responded to somebody, once they saw that I wanted to play sports, if they would have kicked my, I would have responded to the negative reinforcement of being driven. Not everybody responds to that, and this probably is part of a bloodline. And then does it become some version of Buddha? In the Siddhartha story, the prophecy, the king, his son was Siddhartha, and the king went to the medicine man, or the soothsayer, and was like, "Hey, what do you see for my son?" It's like, well, your son's either going to become a great warrior king, the greatest of all, or is going to become this like great spiritual teacher and leader. And then the king was like, well, I can't have that, right? We got to have this great warrior. Meanwhile, what is a spiritual warrior genius? Like, Buddha was a warrior of the highest order. He had to go to war inside of himself. He had to go to war under the Bodhi tree in the context of this story. And in fact, his earliest forays into spiritual practice was he went and hung out with the ascetics, who intentionally deprived themselves of food and forced their bodies into painful positions, which is some version of how Benton's been living for 15 years, right? It's not exactly that, but it's kind of that, right? It is a monastic, ascetic style of living, right? Old Benton is a warrior monk on some level, but a warrior without an external war. And there's no meaning to be found here anyway. This place contains no possibility of external meaning. That's, one of the keys that certainly Buddha would have recognized is, oh yeah, that's and let me I will get to the meat now, that's because I forgot the meat. I made notes right before we started. Here's the meat: is the full acceptance of death. So the war within is to fully accept mortal death, meaning death as portrayed in this realm, the death of the flesh. It's to fully accept that death, and actually to transcend the flesh by going to war with the flesh, to fully accept that the flesh is dead, not that it will die one day. Moloch's machine teaches you that, well, yeah, one day there will be a mortal death in the context of this realm. Well, this realm is death. This flesh is dead. This flesh can't live. Now, are there seemingly animated death formed over biological processes? Sure. And that's within the context of vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions, in conjunction with illusion, and in conjunction with it's not a physical body anyway, and in conjunction with, well, you got to reconcile and solve at a level of an equation for surrealistic notions of unreality, even with respect to the flesh and the Son of Man, why did the Bible keep talking about the Son of Man? Well, that was a recognition of Jesus's flesh, which contains no possibility of life. It's dead. Let the dead bury the dead also refers to this flesh, see? So it's not to attach. So the cycle of the suffering is the idea that this is a cycle of death and rebirth. No, it's not. This is encased within a dead world, in a dead flesh suit that seems to be alive. Well, guess what? The world seems to be alive. It's not. It's dead. It contains no meaning. The body contains no meaning other than the internal meaning of what I am, that can be apprehended by going to war with the flesh. And when I declare what I am is representative of spiritual warrior genius, and the only way to unlock the achievement within the world of death and the game of lies, to unlock the achievement of true knowledge of slash self-realization, is to go to war with the dead flesh by fully accepting the death of the flesh, but not in the future, because all that exists is now it's here, now it's gone, now it's here, now it's gone. How can in the now I be 100% convinced that my physical body will die if it's not already dead? How can I be 100% certain in the now that this flesh will die if it's not dead now? Because tomorrow never comes on some level. They say, oh, because you see other people dying. Well, how can that, in the context of a holy individual experience spiritually, how can that ever guarantee me that my body will die? Because if it's not true in this moment, how can it be true in future moments that, strictly speaking, don't even exist? Meanwhile, if the meteor is on its way, maybe I just snap my fingers and it's all gone and I don't even know it. And now it's just now the consciousness is just continuing to speak somehow. How can I know that? Because I, within the context of delusion and illusion and this experience in the now it's here, now it's gone, now it's here, now it's gone. The flesh is either living and exactly alive in the way this system puts forth right now, or it's dead right now at the level of animated death, death warmed over. Which is it? Well, based on true knowledge of self and what I am as supreme authority and representative of meaning and value symbolically and at the highest level, meaning one with that force, that means in this moment, the only life here is one with that force, meaning everything that's not one with that force is dead, meaning the terra firma, the meat suit, the oxygen, the sun in the sky, the trees, the wind, it's all dead in this moment. And so to the war within is the war with what the psychology has indoctrinated the individual to falsely believe. It's to go within oneself and to internally bootstrap mind, body, and spirit. And my apologies for yurting the stream earlier before getting to the meat. That's on me. Hopefully folks have returned now for the meat of the thing. Yeah, we got 13 in the house for the meat. See, the audience is far more intelligent than Benton, the performer. The fool, playing the fool, necessarily playing the fool, but that's the war. The war is it's a war of transcendence, or dare I say, the concept of a phoenix rising from the ashes, and it's also baptism in the Holy Spirit, and no one comes unto true knowledge of self except through Christ consciousness, and it is the eventual victory over the flesh is the resurrection of the risen Jesus as Lord within me. And anybody who will tell you that Jesus Christ is Lord, who can't specifically answer the question of, to your satisfaction, what does that mean? What do you mean Jesus Christ is Lord? Lord of what? And then whatever they answer, say, okay, we need a location. Oh, you're telling me he's Lord of this world? Well, that can't possibly be true. Meanwhile, what I am functions as Lord of this world, but only within myself on behalf of myself, and that is to walk through the valley of the shadow of death or the underworld. And so, surprise, surprise, in the story of Christ in the Bible, executed by the state of for sedition, entombed and doing what? Most Christians will say, well, he was resurrected 3 days later. Okay, what happened for the 3 days? Traveling the underworld, right? So to undergo this process of contending with the flesh via an internal war, a war with one's flesh and a war with oneself, that is the process whereby the Christ is risen within and resurrected within. And that's where worshiper and worshipee inhabit the same vessel within delusion. And that's what Benton claims credit for. And if you don't believe him or take his word for it, that's fine, because I won't take Saul of Tarsus's word for it. And I certainly view Saul of Tarsus's behavior where he went to the church and got Ananias to sign off on, hey man, will you, pretty please with sugar on top, validate my performance so that these bozos will let me write a bunch of letters. And I suspect that's why this government is never going to prosecute me for tax evasion and put me in federal prison, although they might, because I'm here to tell you whatever I owe them now, I'm never paying. I'm never filing an income tax return. And if I go back to truck driving, it's only going to be on a 1099. And I'm saying it before everybody. Hey, call them right now if you want to. Alert the authorities. I'm telling them directly to their face through Alphabet, Google, YouTube's Hell Pit servers. I'm telling them right now, if the truck driving employs me in about 2 weeks when I can pass a drug test, we're 1099ing it. We're not forming a corporation. And whatever company will pay me on a 1099 to my Social Security card that ain't me and it doesn't belong to me and it's just as dead as the flesh. And I'll just go stand before the judge and say, yeah, judge. And if you don't convict me and send me to prison, I'm going to go do it again if they let me. Because the system you work for, judge, let me do these things. Why didn't it stop me? Why didn't the computer system say, well, we can't pay him on a 1099. He's never going to pay taxes on this. He's not going to pay for bombs. He's not going to pay for murder. He's not going to pay for a system that invites millions of people here to serve corporations, only to then kick half of them back to where they came from, like an NFL kicker punting a ball. Imagine inviting millions of people here, tens of millions of people here to serve corporations, and then one by one punting them back to Guatemala and Honduras and El Salvador. That's what's happening with your tax dollars. I'm not paying for that anymore because Christ won't do that. What would Jesus do? Jesus wouldn't go get a job to pay for taxes so that all of this could happen. Meanwhile, they're like, oh, well, Jesus was a carpenter. Not after baptism, he wasn't. Jesus didn't work a job after baptism. Jesus didn't handle money after baptism. He damn sure didn't pay taxes. Meanwhile, yeah, will I go handle money? Yeah, I sure will, right up until I choose not to. We're not there yet. And if I choose freely to go back to truck driving, if they're foolish enough to pay me 100 cents on the dollar for my labor, and they've already stolen some of my labor because they let me sit around a shipper and a receiver for 22 and a half hours waiting to get loaded after they told me to be there by 6 a.m., and I did so safely, on time, only to wait around 22 and a half hours for no pay just because I'm willing to humiliate myself. Well, if I go back to treating myself to humiliation, I'm not paying for the murder of people all across this world and country. I'm not paying for detention facilities. I'm not paying for ICE. I'm not paying to have people punted back to Guatemala and Honduras and El Salvador. I refuse. I'm not paying for whatever Trump's doing or whatever Biden did. I'm not paying for rich people to get richer every new moment into perpetuity. I'm not paying for banker bailouts. See? Oh, how are we going to build the roads? Like we always have. Gasoline tax. Fuck you. Oh, how are we going to pay for this and that? I don't fucking know. Not with your federal income tax, which mostly pays at this point for interest on the national debt. That's not my problem. I don't owe that money. Now American authoritarians will happily tell me that I owe $143 million because of interest on the national debt, or because of the national debt, and that I'm supposed to pay federal income taxes so that the bankers who always pay themselves first and the investors who chose to buy American debt can be made whole. I don't owe that money. I didn't ask anybody to do those things. Fuck you. And here's Benton. This is the spirit of what I am. It puts the middle finger up to the system and says, come get me, Jack. And I'll alchemize when they put me in that cell. And I'll sit in there cross-legged. And if I don't like the trays, I'll just fast. And it won't be a hunger strike. Finally the guards will say to the warden, hey, warden, old Benton, he ain't looking too good. Can you go in there? And it'll be a woman. Hey, lady warden, can you go in there? And you might want to take a look at old Benton because he's a little wiry when he came in. But you could tell he had muscle on him. He's a little athletic. He could, when he was in Gen Pop, he had a couple of, he defended himself a couple times because, he mixed it up because he had to, not because he wanted to. But you might want to go good and look at him because we damn sure can't put him back in Gen Pop like this. And he ain't never gotten no commissary, right? And he damn sure can't get commissary. In the hole, you don't get commissary. And I guess he don't like the trays. I'll alchemize that. And if they let me starve to death, the flesh is dead anyway. The tray is dead anyway. The food is dead anyway. What is the difference? You're welcome. Now, if you want to go to war, go to war. My war is won. And I'm willing to go to war with this motherfucker anytime I need to. But it's not a war with the system. There's not a war outside going on that ain't no man is safe from. That's a bullshit lie of the system. There's a war going inside. There's a war going on inside of you if you got the cojones to go in there and find it and realize that if you are what I am, your damn manhood needs a war.